Hello there, my name is Peter Thomson. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share my story with you. I met Adrian a little while ago and he explained what he was doing and I was just fascinated by it and obviously wanted to help him, as I'm sure you will as well, get his message out there about people telling their story. I think every person thinks their story is unique, and I have an unusual story, as I'm sure you do too. My first memory really, although is it a memory or a suppressed memory, is that on New Year's Eve when I was 2 years old, which is over 60 years ago now, I reached out because I saw my sister doing the same thing to warm my hands on a 1-bar electric fire. So I reached out with my hands and unfortunately, being 2 years old, I grabbed the bar. Now imagine, I got badly burnt. I was in hospital for a long time. They cut bits off my shoulders and stitched them in my fingers and all the rest of it. And then when I was 7, as my hands grew, instead of growing straight like most people's hands, they grew like this because the skin in my fingers didn't grow even though my hands were growing. So I ended up with hands like this. So of course that was no good. So I went back into hospital for a month and 3 days, and what they did was to cut a piece off my arm here and stitch the skin off my arm into my fingers. Which is why I have hair growing in between my fingers, because it's the skin off my arms. So how strange that I should then pick the things that I did in life, I think, that had damaged hands. They're still at the point where my fingers don't bend in any way. But I became a goalkeeper. So at school I was a goalkeeper, so I was the person that was handling the ball all the time. In the summer I was a wicket-keeper, using my hands again, and as a profession I'm a writer. So all of the things that were to do with my hands, and what this did for me, it gave me a really strange thing in life, and it gave me this wish to be in control. And for many years of my life, this really made life difficult. It gave me a lot of strengths that were really useful. I don't know if you found yourself in this position of wanting to be in control. Let me tell you why it happened. The second time I was in hospital, when I was 7 years old, as my hands were getting better, the bandages, which had started like this great big plaster of Paris coverings of my hands as they healed, became smaller and smaller and smaller. So I had little bandages just across my hands. And one day the nurse said to me, "Peter, come with me." And she took me into the children's ward, because I'd been staying in the men's ward because there were no children in the children's ward. Wasn't that fantastic? There were no children with burns in the children's ward. I say over 60 years ago. So she took me into the children's ward where there was a bowl of water, warm water, with what's called Lux Flakes, very soft soap in them. And she said to me, "Peter, I want you to put your hands in this soft water and play with this water because it'll be good for your skin, it'll make it soft and it'll help the healing process. And stay there, don't take your hands out of the water." She was very insistent about that. "Don't take your hands out of the water until I come back." She forgot. And she left me there for 7 hours. Now, when you're a 7-year-old kid, and you've been drinking lots of orange juice in hospital, in 7 hours you have to pee at least twice. So this was an embarrassing experience, this was a difficult experience, this was an experience that said to me that I have to question people in authority. And I think that's what created my control freakerage, is that I always felt I had to be in control of a situation because I would not trust any authority figure. In fact, it was more than wouldn't trust. I had an actual distrust of authority figures. So if somebody told me to do something, then my instant reaction would be, why? Who are you to tell me to do that? I was very resistant to authority figures. I remember I started my career when after I'd been at school, I got a few O-levels and I went to work in the bank. And I was on permanent relief in the sense that I would go to branches where they'd got somebody missing for the day and I would fill in, so I was the relief person. And it was great because I could bank my salary, which was next to nothing, and I could live on the expenses of being on relief all of the time. And I remember being asked to go to a branch in Birmingham by the manager of the branch I worked at, which was the Colma Road branch. It was the major branch in Birmingham. And he said, "Peter, I want you to go to this branch." It was actually Sheldon branch, I remember it, Sheldon branch, the following week. And I didn't want to go there because everybody there, I felt, wouldn't pull their weight. And other people who worked on relief, as I did, they didn't want to go there either, and they'd already been asked if they would go, and they'd said no. So I said no, I didn't want to go. And he turned round to me, the manager, and said, "It's about time you learnt to do as you're told." Now, for someone with a high control freakery, which I had, somebody who's like that, a dislike of authority figures, there's nothing worse than you can say to somebody like me than you better learn to do as you're told. So I handed in my notice, there and then, because I couldn't cope with that. And that's been a theme throughout my life, is that I wanted to go my own way, do my own thing. And it wasn't until some years later, in fact very, very recently, that meeting Richard Wilkins and Liz Ivory, and particularly in this context, Liz Ivory, who helped me change my feeling of wanting to be in control for a new value of flexibility. And that's changed my life. To be able to be flexible and not so rigid about things. Like control freakery gives you, I always eat this on this day and I do this and this is how I am and I go here and do that. Well, all of that's changed, which is fantastic. So over the years, having left the bank, I decided I had to be in business for myself. And so I set up in business. I became a private investigator, having worked for a private investigator. So I set up an investigation business, tracing absconded debtors, would you believe? And we were being asked to trace 4,000 people a month. 4,000 people a month. I remember a really embarrassing yet enjoyable experience. I'd wanted a desk for my office to start the business. And it was on the 3rd floor of my office in a Birmingham city centre street. And on the ground floor was a firm of bailiffs. So I went down to the bailiffs and I said, "Have you got a desk for sale?" And they said, "Yes, Peter, we've got one." I said, "How much is it?" And they said, "It's 50p. I said, "Oh, fantastic, 50p. We'd only just changed to decimal currency then. And I said, "Would you help me carry it up to the 3rd floor? There was no lift. Would you carry it to the 3rd floor for me?" And they went, "If we carry it for you, it's £1." So I carried it myself and paid the 50p. And I learned one of the best lessons of my entrepreneurial life is it's all very well being able to sell things, but you have to be able to buy things at the right price first. Very useful experience. And I was sat there at my 50p desk on my 50p chair when I decided to interview the first person. Because I'd been working really hard in my investigation business. I was finding people in the morning, I was selling to get more clients in the afternoon, and I was spending the evenings and sometimes into the night writing reports and creating the accounts. So it was a full-on, a lot of time spent. And I finally decided it was time to bring somebody else into my business. And so I interviewed this woman, her name was Margaret. And I was talking to Margaret about how this was a little business now, but it was going somewhere really big. It was going to be this massive organisation. And as I said this, I crossed my legs and I leant on the arm of the chair, the 50p chair, alongside the 50p desk. And as I leant on it, the arm broke off the chair and I fell on the floor. Not just a slip to the side, but an actual fall on the floor. Margaret had the good grace to laugh, and I laughed as well. And I took her on, I had to really, so she wouldn't tell people. And she stayed with me for 8 years, and that was the first person who joined in my organisation. Over the years, I sold that business to the staff. I then moved into bugging and debugging. I have stories to tell you at that one day when we meet over a coffee. And some really hairy examples and things I've been involved in over that time. Very, very exciting though, very exciting times. And from there I got into finance. And I finally set up a business called Compass Leasing PLC. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. We had 65 staff, they were all crazy, they were lovely people. Many of them have gone on to be major successes in business and in life, I have to say, over the years since then. We sold that business, we made millions of pounds, we retired. The shares fell out the sky of the company I sold to, we lost loads of money as well. And it's all been a journey in business of learning how to sell and then allowing people to buy from us. On the private side of my life, I have 4 sons. I've been married twice. My wife Sharon and I have been married for over 30 years. We have 2 boys, I have 4. So 4 altogether, we have 2 between us. And my boys have been the inspiration for so much of the things I've learnt to do. And Sharon has been my almost lifelong companion and the reason why I do what I do. I love life. I love having the opportunity to make a difference to other people's lives by sharing what I've learnt. And I've always known that I've never had all the answers. And therefore life is one long trek of lifelong learning. And the fact that Adrian has taken the time now to put together these videos which enable people like me and like you to share what we know in the hopes that one little thing I might say, you might say, somebody else might say, can change somebody's life forever. The things that I know you'll see Sharon on this series, and she'll tell you about the things she did that changed my life and saved my life. The little things like Liz Ivory saying to me, Peter, control? How about what could replace it? And replacing that with flexibility was a change. The fact that the bank manager said, it's about time you changed. All these little things, these little stories that happen for everybody can make just one thing can change someone's life. I hope that anything I've said or one thing I may have said may have struck a chord with you and will hopefully get you to think in a different way. I wish you every success in your life as I've enjoyed every success in my life. Thank you.